Cyberpunk 2077 was anything but beloved at launch, an unfortunate result of a buggy mess. But underneath it all was an amazing game, one that was always there, with the consistent fixes leading up to the Edgerunners anime, and of course the release of the 2.0 update and Phantom Liberty expansion. The series and its perception has come a long way. There is one issue though. Being such an expansive title and IP, with source books dating back to the late 1980s, Cyberpunk suffers from widespread misconceptions, whether it be from those who continue to live in a perpetual December 10th, 2020 loop, or misinterpretations of both developer quotes and in-game sources. They are present. As a content creator, I realize this issue feels more prevalent to me just because I have to see it under every video, but by no means am I saying this is an epidemic. So the average Cyberpunk fan, especially one heavily invested in the source material, isn't going to be necessarily a victim of these misconceptions. So this video is truly to help out those who are, and of course, entertain. So if this video ends up helping you out in any way, please let me know down below. And if you end up enjoying the video and are a Cyberpunk fan, please remember to subscribe and check out the rest of my content. Without any further delay, let's begin. Mike Pondsmith started the Cyberpunk universe with the 1988 release Cyberpunk Play, character roles, and of course, lore pertaining to Night City and the surrounding world. From there, it would continue to expand with supplements like Solo of Fortune, and full releases such as Cyberpunk 2020, all of which led up to the inception and creation of Cyberpunk 2077 in collaboration with CD Projekt Red. Yet surprisingly, one of the most contested topics I've seen both in my comments and on media like Reddit or Twitter is if the source books are canon to 2077. Now, a huge source of its misconception is simply the fact that Silverhand's memories are unreliable and show a different version of events than what actually happened. This is a very convoluted, yet explainable topic I already have videos on, so I'll just toss some comments by Mike Pondsmith up on screen that prove his memory isn't reality, so 2077 can't be considered an alternate timeline because of them. Hell, here's a clip from 2077 saying so.
Old Cunningham you strove to save in Arasaka Tower no longer exists. This should be obvious to you, as you were responsible for her death.
Your death wasn't Johnny's fault.
How could you know?
Seeing you in his memories, it was an accident.
What you saw was his subjective view of what happened. A warped account of events he locked away in his subconscious and replayed time and again. It bears no resemblance to the truth.
But I think I finally found the second source of the issue.
Cyberpunk 2077 isn't only set 50 years after the source material, but it also takes place in a parallel timeline. This gave the team the freedom to create a game that respected and referenced the source material, but also suited the shift to the video game medium.
That was a snippet from a YouTube video titled Making of Cyberpunk 2077 Behind the Scenes Documentary. This video obviously makes the claim that 2077 is a parallel timeline and has 1.3 million views. Just to cover some ground, I have a few interpretations of this clip. Firstly, it could just be a poor interpretation of something the developer said, something lost in the game of telephone, or even just poor wording. Secondly, let's make the assumption we can take this clip at face value, that Cyberpunk 2077 really was meant to be claimed as a parallel timeline. My interpretation would be based on other evidence I will be showing. Visualize two parallel lines because I suck at editing. These represent the timeline of 2077. Now, everything leading up to 2077 is identical, but once the timeline hits the beginning of the game, one timeline branches off. This branching would be explainable by one key element of the title. Cyberpunk is a role-playing game with alternative playthroughs and endings. The majority of playthroughs will not match what might end up being considered the canon events for the TTRPG moving forward. So for that sole purpose, it can't be claimed that your 2077 is canon to the TTRPGs, but it can be claimed that the TTRPGs are canon to 2077. I hope that makes sense. I'm genuinely trying to put that in the best way possible. If there's any shadow of the doubt left in your mind, Mike Pondsmith has this to say. There's still an incorrect interview floating around the interwebs that states that Cyberpunk 2077 and Cyberpunk 2020 are separate timelines. To clear this up, I am posting right here and now that the timeline is unified, with the path moving from Cyberpunk 2013 through 2020, then through Red, and up to 2077. Lord knows we spent enough time hashing the details out over the past 6 months. Expect more on this later. Back to your cyber lives, everyone. So, there you have it, chooms. Following up the premise of source material, many would also be led to believe that retconned or alternate universe material has no narrative connection to canon. And while 9 times out of 10 that's a safe bet to make, it's simply not the case for the Cyberpunk universe. And we have one specific book to thank especially for this, CyberGeneration. Released in 1993, the story centered around teenagers with unusual superhuman skills gained from a nanotech virus, which would be known as the Carbon Plague, an event that was recycled into Cyberpunk Red, but contained rather than having the opportunity to spread. This sourcebook definitely became a standout in large part to its tone and theme. Corporations had now become the new world governments. Players took on the role of youngsters, and heroic motives seemed to strangle the previous saying, Cyberpunk isn't about saving humanity, it's about saving yourself. A theme of Cyberpunk that is core to the setting. Much of what makes Cyberpunk is the grim reality you find yourself in, one that isn't forgiving to those who try to make some big name for themselves. A would-be legend that oversteps at the wrong moment has their name erased from existence. It's certainly no fantasy land. So the superhero fiction prevalent in the story completely shifts its core. But that's not to say CyberGeneration doesn't still share a lot of its DNA with the canon timeline. You see, while this book branches from the outbreak of the Carbon Plague and thereby differentiates itself from the main timeline, it's actually crammed with information that's pre-Carbon Plague that many hold to be canon today, and hasn't ever really been contradicted or stated otherwise. Legends like Morgan Blackhand and Rache Bartmoss have their stories expanded beyond much of what we've seen in core books. Then there's All Cunningham. Her story being the most interesting of the bunch, as it not only establishes a background, but her future beyond 2013, much of which is yet to be contradicted to this day, and is if anything, supported. A story of her desperate attempt to return to the real world in a cloned body after being accidentally trapped in the net by Silverhand during the 2013 raid. Though she learns a harsh truth, she can only copy-paste herself into a new body. The original self remains in the net, allowing 2 alts to live at once. So goes her operating both within and outside the net with the help of hired staff and herself. In this timeline, Silverhand is critically injured in an assassination attempt by Biotechnica, and Alt retrieves his body to soul kill and clone. But in this process, stores the original Johnny for safekeeping, leaving a clone of himself to roam instead. It is only once we read the canon Black Dog story in Cyberpunk Red that you can start piecing together the details. An adventure in which a group of mercenaries transport the dead but preserved Silverhand with his engram stored within to a woman named Angel. That's right, long story, but Arasaka wasn't in possession of Silverhand's body post-nuke. It was only later, closer to the 2070s, that they got it. Angel was a woman who bears a stunning resemblance to All Cunningham, the name Angel being a likely reference to a named chapter in Never Fade Away, Angel Heaven. There's a lot more to this story and the connections between canon and non-canon material, but this should get you thinking about just what happened with Silverhand between 2023 and 2077. I'll have some videos linked below to help you along further, but the point is, alternate timelines matter. Adam Smasher isn't a cyberpsycho. Wait, what? Yeah, a lot of you are probably confused by that statement. Well, that's because it isn't true. And yet again, is the second most common comment I receive on any video involving Smasher or cyberpsychosis. This idea stems from a misunderstanding about exactly what Smasher is and how it correlates to the concept of cyberpsychosis. Adam Smasher is a towering cyborg with little to no humanity left. In fact, his empathy stat is completely empty. There isn't even a 0. It's just non-applicable. But a typical working definition people have about cyberpsychosis is that the cyberware itself makes you lose control and go off the deep end, thereby making the victim commit atrocious acts they otherwise wouldn't. But then you look at Atom Smasher, who is completely in control and lucid about his destruction, and there's no way it's reasonable to assume he's a cyberpsycho, right? Well, that's wrong. This misconception really is more about cyberpsychosis itself rather than a misconception about Smasher. Let me explain. Cyberpsychos are typically people already afflicted with existing psychopathic tendencies. The cybernetics they install only go on to enable and enhance these pre-existing conditions. This mixture of circumstances accelerate or exaggerate the outcome, as a result of pushing people to lose their sense of identity with every piece of themselves replaced by Chrome. It's why someone like David Martinez, who had a relatively healthy upbringing, was so resistant to the effects of cyberware, while a veteran and rebel like Johnny Silverhand could succumb to it quickly. Wait, what? Silverhand's a cyberpsycho now? Yes, he is. In a Reddit post, this is what Pondsmith had to say about it. Yes, took 20 years, but you guys finally figured out the hand is Johnny's cyberpsycho expression. Internally, Johnny treats any horrible thing he does as the hand took over. End quote. I think this is funny for the sole reason players of the original TTRPG definitely called this, but the lack of internet discussion just never gave way to it being talked about. Anyway, you're probably surprised by how well put together Johnny is despite being a cyberpsycho. He certainly wasn't acting like Maine, David, or any of the enemies we encounter in 2077. Well, this actually plays into another concept that connects to Smasher. A user actually asked Pondsmith why Atom Smasher wouldn't be considered a cyberpsycho, to which Pondsmith replied, "Didn't say he wasn't. There's a concept in psychology called high functioning. Adam is a high functioning cyberpsycho who happens to have a job where they want him to kill people." End quote. So yeah, cyberpsychosis is way more complicated of a topic than it might initially appear, which is why I'm working on a video going in depth on the subject, so you chooms will see that sometime soon. For anyone who's played the Firestorm Shockwave adventure or listened to Max Mike's Moral Rock show, this is going to be a familiar subject. Yorinobu Arasaka is a clone.
Now, I'm sure you've seen the news. Yorinobu Arasaka's the new head of Arasaka Corporation. Yeah, I'm afraid that's not possible. The truth is, Yorinobu's as dead as a runner surfing the black wall, and he's been for the past 50 years. So I guess we should start beginning, right, people? Yorinobu, as a lot of you know, is the youngest son of Old Man Saburo, but he didn't take after his father, or quite the contrary. Now, when Yorinobu learned what his father's enterprise really stood for, he left. Kid ran away from home, formed a biker gang called the Steel Dragons. They weren't just any street gang, mind you. They had a mission. Espionage, terrorism, assassinations, all aimed at the Arasaka Zaibatsu. And they kept it up for years, too. But it all stopped on the day those towers in Corpo Plaza came down now. That's quite a coincidence, don't you think? The official story is that after the death of his big brother, Yorinobu came home, apologized to Big Daddy Saburo, and was accepted back into the family. That's a straight-up con, people. Yorinobu was in those towers when they got wiped off the map. Maybe even helped bring them down. And all the evidence is buried under 1 million tons of debris. We don't know. So who's this guy, you ask? The one on TV talking about his dear old dad and the virtues of the Arasaka family business? Yeah, I've got a few guesses. It's no secret Arasaka's been working on human cloning tech for almost a century now. So it's possible this guy is some sort of mind control clone of the original Yorinobu. Wouldn't that be just like old Saburo? Your kid doesn't turn out the way you want, so you just try again. Alternately, never figured out what happened to Kei, Yorinobu's older brother, after the war. Maybe he disappeared to a black clinic and he came out looking just like his younger brother, but without the stain of the fourth corporate weighing him down with bad PR. What do you think?
During the Firestorm Shockwave adventure while inside the Arasaka HQ, Player characters can discover a room next to the Soul Killer storage core with a large monitor displaying a slightly surreal version of Yorinobu, with even the data file being named Arasaka Yorinobu 9/24/2022. Attached to this room is what appears to be a cloning facility where a neural uploading system is hooked into the storage core, equipment that had definitely been used, and tissue samples labeled All Cunningham and Yorinobu Arasaka can be found. So it's a done deal, right? Yorinobu in 2077 is a clone. But it isn't true. This is actually a piece of information I got tripped up on, and thereby fell for. I actually made a whole video about the topic, discussing Max Mike, cloning technology, and finally the grand reveal in Firestorm Shockwave. All before realizing I made an easy yet grave mistake. I missed a single sentence in Cyberpunk Red that disproved the entire theory. That's right, a single sentence. Thought to have been soul killed by his elder brother K, it turned out that the person who ended up under the probes was a body double. Yorinobu made sure that during the war, he was impossible to find. End quote, page 268 of Cyberpunk Red. Poser gangs who look like Elvis, corporate doubles, FIA faceplates. I'm just going to start calling everyone in Cyberpunk a body double at this point. Saburo, body double. Kurt Hansen, body double. All Cunningham, body double. Jackie Wells, body double. Well, speaking of Jackie, he can't be saved. Not even by the Relic. This ultimately comes down to two key points about Jackie's death. First, how and where the damage occurred. Jackie was shot in the gut by Arasaka security. Security that one can only assume aren't using nearly as kind of weaponry as Dexter Deshawn, who used a small caliber round when killing V. Second, being what specifically caused his death. Excessive loss of blood. The nanites required to save V's life weren't programmed in such a way to interact with the rest of the body. Though let's say they were, and managed to activate pre-death and make their way to his torso to repair it. Even if they had stitched him up, by the time they would have, he had lost too much blood for it to matter. So unless the Relic has an invisible blood bag connected to an invisible IV pole, Jackie was bound to die. So yes, if Jackie had the Relic slotted at his time of death, he would have remained dead. Then the story would continue like it was fated to anyway. Or maybe he would have been revived, went to meet Dex with V, then got shot and dumped again anyway. The old net is a dangerous place to say the least. It's home to countless evolved rogue AI beyond human comprehension, many of which sprouted from military-grade artificial intelligence, leaving an ingrained sense of bloodlust for everything they can reach. So with the IG protocol net being so valuable in the world of cyberpunk, yet a huge portion of it risking the extinction of humanity, many fans ask one question: why not just destroy the physical remnants of the old net and reset? Well, chooms, what a loaded question, and to be honest, much easier said than done. At least from my technical understanding of the net and its function in 2077. But for the sake of avoiding overcomplications, I'm going to create one hypothetical. Let's say there was a way for humanity to disable the remnants of hardware that run the old net hidden in various abandoned bunkers or orbital facilities, whether it be using tech to access hard to reach places, setting off EMPs, or whatever you can think of. You must also ask, who would be willing to spend the money to do this? And why would they want to? Well, no one wants to, chooms. At least no one with the resources to do it. There is a reason that despite the ban and risks of diving across a black wall, major corporations and governments remain doing so. Whether it be Militech with Cynosure, Arasaka with Child Netrunners, or the NUSA with Songbird. The abandoned data left behind in the old net and the alert of controlling world-ending rogue AI is just too valuable. Why would any organization in the cyberpunk universe elect to give up their chance at an end-all, be-all trump card? So here, the old net remains. It is only once the threat reaches a critical point that these groups would even consider permanently destroying the old net. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this topic, I've also released a video extensively covering the logistics of how the net functions and difficulties in destroying it, so please go give it a watch if you haven't already. The functions of the Sandevistan and Krasnikov are highly misunderstood in the fanbase, most of which can be attributed to how it's portrayed in Edgerunners and obviously 2077. It's understandable though. If you're just casually watching or playing, it can only really look like one thing: time manipulation. The ability to slow time around you for everyone and everything but yourself, and others with a Sandevistan or Krasnikov. But that's actually not true, which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise if you're familiar with the setting and just how detrimental a power like that would be. If a corporation really had the ability to alter the fabric of reality like that, there'd be a single entity at the top and everyone else would be bottom feeders. Luckily for everyone in the cyberpunk universe, it doesn't work like that. The Sandevistan, also known as Speedware, and the Krasnikov are called Neuralware Cyberware. Yeah, a lot of wares. It's wearing me out. Neuralware essentially uses nanotechnology to thread tiny linkages through the central nervous system, allowing systems like Speedware to route signals to the nervous system and increase existing abilities. In lore, Sandevistans are activated with a sub-vocalized mental command word, which then sends signals to the user's nerves to have superhuman awareness, reaction time, and reflexes. While this alone is helpful, technology improvements are what made this so confusing, as by 2077, the implant is also capable of sending these signals to the muscles to increase their output, thereby overclocking the body to match the speed of the user's new reflexes that dilates their perception of time. So this is why they seem to be moving normally in slow time. It's really just making them a superhuman in that split moment, which is also why it's so damaging to the user. Your body isn't meant to be moving at such an insane speed, nor is your nervous system meant to be rapid firing so much information that it slows time. The Krasnikov for the most part works the same, the biggest difference being that it's always activated, allowing the user to always be reacting with a higher than normal reaction speed. But it comes at a cost. The user must learn to readjust his or her actions to a world that appears to be moving in slow motion. Some versions of the Flash have the same consequence. As you can imagine, this is extremely damaging to the humanity of the user. Now, this specific piece was changed in 2077 for obvious reasons. Actually playing in slow motion at all times would be relatively unenjoyable, so you can instead think of it as an automatic Sandy by the time of 2077. And here's a few rapid fire corrections. There was actually 2 Arasaka towers in 2023, but that probably got retconned along with an aftershock story because of 9/11. That's right, read Mike Pondsmith's quote on screen. Militech was also always behind the raid. Silverhand was just the lead of a crew meant to be decoys, not to their knowledge though. The Night City legend, Morgan Blackhand, survived the AHQ incident. The data crash wasn't actually meant to destroy the net. It had parameters to target only corporations and make the net a free landscape. But the Rabbids virus got out of hand and started maliciously attacking everything in sight. David Martinez wasn't soul killed. The ending transition was him getting his head blown off, after Smasher surprisingly respected his final words and wasn't interested in being a construct. Arasaka didn't trap Alt in the net. It was Silverhand who prematurely disconnected her body before her construct could return to it in 2013. Probably the saddest accident in all of Cyberpunk's story, not to mention it being extremely impactful to the future of the timeline. And those are all the current misconceptions I have to talk about. Let me know if I missed any and maybe I can tackle them in future content. Please remember to leave a like and subscribe if you learned anything new or enjoyed the video. A huge thanks to all the channel members up on screen. I appreciate the support more than I could ever put into words, and love being able to create content for the Cyberpunk community. As always, remember to have a great week, and I will see you later, chooms.